My name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I want to welcome you all to our program this evening. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I'm going to be talking with Ray McGovern. Before I go any further, though, I want you to know that the opinions expressed on Just Peace do not necessarily reflect those of Radio Free Georgia Broadcasting Foundation Incorporated, its board, staff, or volunteers. And I want to give a little bit of a background about Ray McGovern. There's so much about his background, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of this. Ray came to Washington from his native Bronx in the early 60s as an Army infantry intelligence officer, and then served as a CIA analyst for 27 years, from the administration of John F. Kennedy to that of George H.W. Bush. Ray's duties included chairing national intelligence estimates and preparing the president's daily brief, which he briefed one-on-one to President Ronald Reagan's 5 most senior national security advisors from 1981 to 1985. In January 2003, Ray co-created Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, otherwise known as VIPS, V-I-P-S, to expose how intelligence was being falsified to justify the war on Iraq. On the afternoon of February 5th, 2003, Secretary of State Colin Powell misled the UN Security Council on Iraq. VIP sent a blunt memorandum to President George W. Bush in which the VIPS gave Powell a C-. That's just an example. There's so much of Ray McGovern's background. Ray, you're there, right? So this is Ray McGovern. Ray, I know I just gave a brief introduction to you. It's hard to know where to begin because you've had such a long, incredible career. And I've been blessed to interview you over the years as well, actually. So what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Well, I hope you didn't mention my imprisonments. When I had to spend the evening at the, what they call the pits or the tombs in the bottom of Manhattan, because I wanted to ask General Petraeus some questions about why his crackerjack Iraqi forces ran away when I challenged the Senate, knowing that they all knew that Gina Haspel, their nominee for the CIA, was was pioneering the torture techniques perfected by these psychologists, and that she ran the first prison camp, the first torture camp, where the waterboarding was done in Thailand, and then had the records destroyed, the videotapes destroyed of that. So I got up in the Senate and unauthorized told them, look, they all know about this. How can that be ashamed of approving her for the head of the CIA now? And so I get to spend another night in a not-so-nice jail in D.C. that time. So I'm glad you didn't mention any of my imprisonments.
I'll leave that for you. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about any number of things, but of course we will be talking about Julian Assange, but I want to make reference to Seth Rich, who was murdered actually in July 2016 in Washington. And clearly he's back in the news these days. So what are these stories about the FBI and Seth Rich, Ray? So let's go into that quite a bit, actually. So tell us about this.
Yeah. Well, it's good, Heather, that you know this, because people who rely on the New York Times or the Washington Post or other organs like that have not heard or read a word about this. So the revelation comes as a result of 2 FOIA, that is Freedom of Information Act requests, and both of them were for information that the FBI was holding on Seth Rich. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, you are. Good. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right. Well, the first one was answered by the FBI saying, we don't have any records, no emails. We have nothing on Seth Rich. He's not really one of our concerns. Well, then a second FOIA on a slightly different tangent, asking for all emails or other information pertaining to conversations between Peter Strzok and his paramour, Lisa Page. Page was a lawyer working for McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, and Strzok was sort of in charge of investigating first Hillary and then starting the Russia investigation. Anyhow, there were, it turns out, lots of emails exchanged between them, or texts as well. And it's not like Seth Rich's name was buried in the bottom of the text. No. The subject read Seth Rich. So these were uncovered by this separate FOIA lawsuit. And so the original came back, the original lawyers, and said, no, wait a second. Wait a second. You said you didn't have any. So, long story short, unless you're prepared to believe that the FBI is incredibly inept, that they cannot even search its machines with the code word or with the search word, Rich or Seth, or hope better both together, unless you're prepared to believe that, the FBI lied. It lied about having information about Seth Rich, and the cables or the emails, I suppose, that were uncovered date back to just a month after he was killed. He was killed on the streets of Washington, 4 o'clock in the morning on July 10th, 2016, and there was a great uproar about it. Why? Well, because he was no simple person. He was working at the Democratic National Committee. He was involved in computer and other things, and immediately there was some attention paid to the fact that he may have been the leaker of the emails on the DNC that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange announced he had on the 12th of June, so that was just a month later. Now, nothing much happened until a month after the killing, and that is when Julian Assange got up. Well, actually, he was interviewed, a TV interview in the Netherlands, or by the Netherlands, and the question was asked, well, what about Seth Rich? And Julian said, well, this shows the risks that our sources run. When they divulge, when they share information like this, when they whistleblow, it's really, really hard. And so the interviewer says, so you use your source? And Assange said, no, we don't discuss our sources. But I will tell you this, we have offered a $20,000 reward for anyone who throws light on who it was that murdered Seth Rich a month ago. Now, why is that important? Well, I know Julian Assange pretty well. I certainly know how he handles his sources. This is the only time that I have seen him go so far as to hint, the veriest hint, at who may have been his sources. And so this was a kind of a broadcast hint, and it got the wheels turning again. Well, could it have been Seth Rich? Could it have been Seth Rich? Now, next thing you know, some people start saying, well, there are indications that it was Seth Rich, and they are immediately branded, quote, conspiracy theorists, end quote. And then, and this is really interesting because Cy Hirsch, who's the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, got a record that is unparalleled in digging into these things. He looked into this, and he was unwittingly, but he didn't know he was being recorded, and talking to a fellow named Ed Butowski, and he let it all hang out. He said, Aaron Rich, his brother, Seth's brother, and Seth were involved in this operation to share this information from the DNC, mind you, with WikiLeaks. He says that Cy Hirsch says that he had a really good source at a top level of the FBI. He says to Butowski, he says, I've been around a while. What happened was Seth and Aaron, his brother, were in touch with WikiLeaks, and this is in the FBI files. How do they know it? Well, because the FBI seized Seth Rich's computer right off the bat. So, what's the rub here? The rub here is that, according to the FBI now, the file that Cy Hirsch was able to get somebody to read for him, they offered WikiLeaks a sample of the kinds of emails that they could provide, emails of the DNC correspondence up until the end of May. That's when the cutoff was.
Wow.
And the rub is that they were asking for money. Okay, that's not so nice. We had this idealistic idea of Seth Rich, and no, Aaron and Seth were looking for money.
I tell you, Ray, before we talk more about them asking for money, I just need to play a quick announcement. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Again, my name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm pleased to say that tonight I'm talking with Ray McGovern about the case of the WikiLeaks. We want to get into more details. Of course, you were about to do that, Ray, about WikiLeaks and these released personal emails from Hillary Clinton's website, or do you want to go into some? I know you're going into some details about that as well. But so the speculation is that Seth Rich, who was killed, murdered in 2016, and his brother were asking WikiLeaks for money if they release these emails. Is that correct? Is that what you were about to say? That's what you referred to, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have the transcript of what Cy Hirsch told this fellow Ed Butowski, and here's the one sentence that creeps out here. I have someone on the inside of the FBI. I've been around for a long time. I have somebody on the inside who will go and read a file for me. This person is unbelievably accurate, careful. He's a very high-level guy, and he'll do a favor. You're just going to have to trust me, says Cy Hirsch to Ed Butowski, not knowing that it's Cy Hirsch, not knowing that he's being recorded. Now, it is his voice. See, he doesn't disavow that it is a voice.
Right.
He doesn't want to say anything more about it for obvious reasons. He's an investigative reporter, and he doesn't want to risk further damage to his source at this high level of the FBI. So that's really interesting, because the FBI now claimed a month ago that they had absolutely zero correspondence on Seth Rich. And then, as we said at the beginning of your program, it turns out that these two people at very high levels, working for the director and then working for the deputy director, were conversing about, what was the subject line? Seth Rich. So the question becomes, why would the FBI lie? Okay, I'm not gonna entertain the bizarre notion that they cannot successfully search for correspondence on Seth Rich. I just, if it were in the body of the email.
But why are they lying, though? Why would you think they're lying? Why, Ray? Why is the FBI lying about this? What? So it's always a question, but what do they want to hide? What are they hiding? What do they want to hide? But go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Well, James Comey, who was head of the FBI at the time, was the first and foremost person out there saying the Russians hacked into DNC. The Russians hacked into the DNC, and they gave those very, very damaging to Hillary emails to WikiLeaks. Now, that was the story, and he got the CIA and the NSA all to buy into that story. And we know that when James Comey learned from the DNC that its computers had been hacked, what did he do? Zippo. Zero. He did nothing. Now, if you were the head of the FBI, Heather, don't you think you'd sort of like send your technicians right in there, grab a hold of those computers and see?
One would think. Okay, well let me just, Ray, let's just step back here for a moment, because I just want to mention that there is this assumption, and a lot of this has been discussed lately with President Trump, right? That it was the Russians who did the hacking here back in 2016. But the indications seem to be that was really not the case at all. So go into that, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now I have to. My wife always says, Heather, Ray, for Pete's sake, always make clear right up front what you think of President Trump.
Right.
What I think of President Trump is he's the very worst president the United States ever had. And, there's been some pretty bad ones, okay?
Right,
So
that's true.
that's how I feel about Trump.
All
When
right.
people say, well, now you seem to be in the same wavelength as Trump, well, they don't understand the ethos of an intelligence officer. An intelligence officer pursues the truth without fear or favor, and if it happens to be analogous or even the same as a president, a pundit, or a politician, that's coincidence, okay? That's not causal. And so we are in the embarrassing position of always being called, defendants or apologists for Trump. And it just so happens that on this one issue, and it is a matter of some consequence, he happens to be right. Comey, the head of the FBI, Brennan, the head of the CIA, Rogers, the head of the NSA, and James Clapper, the National Intelligence Director, have all lied through their teeth. Now, we mentioned Comey before. Now, Comey didn't send anyone to look at the DNC computers at a time when, my God, John McCain was saying the Russians have committed an act of war. An act of war. Everybody was saying it's an act of war. Well, don't you think if you were FBI director, you would kind of at least look into what happened to DNC computers? Well, he says, the DNC didn't want us to look into the computers. Well, come on. Yeah. What does it take for an FBI director to get a little warrant or a letter of introduction and get in there right quick? Well, he didn't do that. He depended on a outfit hired by the DNC called CrowdStrike. And we learned just about 5 months ago that not only does CrowdStrike have a terrible reputation for accuracy, not only is it known to be extremely anti-Russian, but it never gave, now catch this, most people don't know this, it never gave James Comey a final report on the forensics that they were supposed to have done. Never gave Comey a final report. So when Comey says, this is a crackerjack outfit, realized that the only thing he had was some redacted drafts, and they never gave him a final report. That came up at a court trial, and the judge was embarrassed, but he didn't let it sway him in one way or another. There are other things that came up in court recently that fortify what we found 3 years ago, and that is, do the Russians hack? Of course they hack. Everybody hacks. Did the Russians try to hack into the DNC? Of course. Well, if they didn't, those intelligence officers should be fired. But was it the Russians that hacked into the DNC and gave those emails to Julian Assange? We can prove by forensics, by the principles of physics, like fluid dynamics. I'm a history major, but I've learned an awful lot from the technical directors that we have with us in Veteran Intelligence Professional Society. Two former technical directors of the NSA worked very hard on the forensics with other people, independent people, some of them overseas, and came up with what we consider to be physical proof that there was no hacking of the DNC in this sense, that those emails were gotten and given to Julian Assange. Rather, what happened, and the evidence shows this, is that somebody with direct access to the DNC took a little thumb drive, stuck it into his machine, and copied the emails onto this flash drive or thumb drive, put it in his pocket, got on a plane, got over to wherever WikiLeaks was releasing this thing. We can prove that, but nobody will give us the time of day. Why? And why is the FBI lying? Because Comey and the others are way out in front saying it was the Russians, it was the Russians, it was the Russians. And for the only time that I can remember Trump being correct in the last 3 years, it's that it wasn't the Russians, it was something else. And the best candidate, and I have to be careful here, we can prove what I just said from forensics, from the principles of physics applied to this problem.
Right.
We can't say anything about about Seth Rich, it's all circumstantial evidence, but when you have Julian Assange hinting broadly, and then you have Cy Hirsch, no slouch he, and then, there are a couple other things here. The FBI has been, FBI took possession of Seth Rich's computer on the 10th, 11th maybe, of July, the day after he died, he was murdered, in 2016, and we were expecting to have some sort of report from the FBI, but I guess they forgot about it, put it on a shelf, and looked at it because we heard zip.
Wow.
And what they're afraid of course, is that what Cy Hirsch found out from his high-level FBI person, well, it looks like the Rich brothers may have been involved in this. Now, we can't prove that, but there are other indications that they were. And I guess the last thing that I would cite to hint in that direction is simply this. Aaron Rich, whom...
And he is the brother, just so everyone knows, of Seth Rich. Seth Rich being the one who was killed. But Aaron, could you tell us a little bit about Aaron before you mention what you were going to say? What about him?
Aaron was, by all accounts, a highly sophisticated cyber person.
Right.
And neither of them were apprentices at this kind of thing. And, Cy Hirsch, I tend to believe him and his FBI source more than I believe the others. But Cy says that it was both Aaron and Seth that were asking for money for the rest of the emails. Now, I don't know how it all worked out.
So you don't know whether or not they got money. Do you know if they got money, Ray? Did they get money from WikiLeaks?
Cy Hirsch is our only source on this. Surely the FBI file has it, but Cy was not able to relate that. So, the reason I mention Aaron Rich is because to mention Seth Rich ever since the 11th of July 2016, and to hint, even after Assange said what he said, even to hint that Seth Rich may have been the person that we think, well, we don't know if it was Seth, but there was a person with direct authorized access to those DNC computers, and Seth qualifies for that. What about this whole complex of calling these people conspiracy theorists? Conspiracy theorists. It's as recent as just last week. Anyone who mentions Seth Rich is a conspiracy theorist. Well, I think that has to do with how the media, which has not reported on the FBI lying yet. Now, it's been around for about 10 days. It's got to come out, but it will be treated in such a way as, the FBI will be defended. Why? Because, the biggest, I have to say this, and it's important, I've been around 50 years in Washington. I've seen a lot of change. But the biggest change by far has been that we no longer have a free media.
Right.
The media, the mainstream media, has become the buttress and an integral part of what some people call the deep state. I prefer the national security state, where the people there, like Comey and Brennan and Clapper, think that they know really what's best for the country, and they're willing and able to try to prevent a person like Trump from becoming president, as they did, and then when he does become president, try to sabotage any plan he may genuinely have had to improve relations with Russia.
Well, I tell you what, Ray, along the lines of the media, let me just mention that to everyone that you are listening to WRFG-Atlanta 89.3 FM. My name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace. And tonight I'm talking with Ray McGovern. It's just always such a treat to get your vast knowledge of so much, Ray. So now, I just, as far as, there was never an investigation into the killing of Seth Rich, right? They never investigated this. Who do you think actually killed him? I mean, okay, I have a couple of questions. This is a little bit different from what we've discussed in the past, but because you and I have been talking about this a little bit, going back and forth. but there was not an investigation into this killing, for one. So I'd like to know who you think actually killed him, because when he was killed, nothing was taken from him. They didn't. His body was just abandoned in this neighborhood in Washington, D.C. They didn't take his wallet. They didn't take anything from him, right? So it seemed as if there was another motive here, in my opinion. So who killed him, do you think? And was he... Go ahead. Let me just leave it with that for right now. What's your opinion on that?
Well, we analysts, we political analysts, as opposed to the forensics experts who can come up with ground truth, we have to do circumstantial kind of things. We have to read everything and piece it all together, connect the dots, if you will. Now, it was on June 12th that Julian Assange, June 12th, 2016, right in the heat of the campaign, Julian said to an interviewer, we have emails relating to Hillary Clinton and the pending publication, end quote. Whoa. June 12th, okay? Now, we know from forensic studies, and not many people know this, that those emails were taken out of the DNC computers on the 23rd and the 25th of May, okay? So Julian had them already, and he said he was going to publish them. Now, this sent electric shocks around Hillary and her crew. What did he have? Did he have emails that show what we did to Bernie Sanders? My God, if he just has half of them, he'll see that we stole the nomination. And I mince no words on this. That's what those emails showed, that we stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders, okay? Wow, what's going to happen? So that was the 12th. Now, it's pretty easy to do some forensics and look at these computers and figure out who it was that copied those emails with a thumb drive. And my guess, and this is guesswork now, this is not forensics, okay? My guess is that it may have considered that Seth Rich was involved, and maybe with the help of his brother, and Joe just had to end it all. Okay, call me a conspiracy theorist, but he died. He got killed. They didn't take his watch or anything else, and they didn't investigate. So what does that leave us? That leaves us with his computer. The first thing a cop does is have a warrant to where this fellow lived, and he went in there, and they did go in there, and they got his computer. They went and see if, he had an affair with somebody who was out to get him or something like that. So they took his computer, but they couldn't figure out what was in it. That's when they gave it to the FBI. Now, that was on the 11th of June. 11th of July, the day after Seth Rich was murdered, and we haven't heard one word.
Oh, really?
What happened to that computer? The only word we've heard is what Cy Hirsch has told us from what he considers to be a very, very good source. And that's a very unfortunate word because it shows, if true, and why would the FBI files be lying about this? Those files show that there were discussions between the Riches, and both Riches, okay, Aaron and Seth, and that they were in discussions with WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks was saying, hey, this is great, yeah, we really like these. And these guys said, well, it's going to cost you, we need some money. And that's so. Why is Aaron Rich right now subpoenaing our two former technical directors of the NSA, Bill Binney and Ed Loomis, part of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity? Why are they subpoenaing me? Why are they asking for incredible amounts of information? I've never seen so intrusive a subpoena. What are they trying to do? Do they think, or they really think that they might find an email from Vladimirovich Putin saying, McGovern, you're doing a good job. Tell them it wasn't the Russians. It wasn't.
Well, Ray, let's go back to this a sec, because, okay, so you have been subpoenaed by the government, right? Now, what body in the government subpoenaed you, actually?
Not.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, not by the government, but by Aaron Rich.
By Aaron Rich, I'm
His
sorry.
lawyer, Gottlieb.
Okay.
Yeah. And his lawyer, who's a big Democratic lawyer, a lawyer that has worked extensively for the DNC.
So let's go back.
There they are.
Let's go back a sec. What do you think they want to get from you? And there are a few other folks who've been subpoenaed as well, right? So, go ahead.
The two other former, yeah.
Right.
Well, here it is. I'll read it to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Request number 1. It's not very long. All documents and communications, excluding documents that have been published in public sources, relating to claims that 1, the DNC was not hacked by Russia in 2016, or 2, that the DNC data was leaked, not hacked, comma, including but not limited to claims made in memos by members of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity found online. And then they give 3 examples of our memos, and they couldn't have picked better examples. I wonder why they were trying to shoot themselves in the foot. But of the 3 memos to the president, one of them has Barack Obama saying 2 days before he left office, saying, the conclusions of the this is a quote, okay? The conclusions of the Intelligence Committee with respect to Russian hacking getting to WikiLeaks are inconclusive. And period, end quote. So the conclusions by Brennan and Clapper and Comey that he had been briefed up and down on just 13 days before, Obama felt it necessary to say just before he left office that those conclusions, such as they were inconclusive. I had a chance to ask Clapper, who had been, this was after he retired from being Director of National Intelligence, I had a chance to ask him at a public event at Carnegie. I said, Mr. Clapper, how do you explain that just 13 days after you briefed the president saying it had to be the Russians giving it to WikiLeaks, how do you explain that 2 days before he goes out of town, Obama says your conclusions were inconclusive? He said, well, I don't know. I can't explain that. But we're pretty sure they got the WikiLeaks. Well, pretty sure it doesn't do it to me. And that's a direct quote, and that's online. It's on my website and other places. So what you have here is the lawyers for Aaron Rich citing that memorandum from VIPS, and then another one, which was the key one. It was dated July 24, 2017, and that is the one that said to the president, hey, Mr. President, you really ought to ask your CIA director to follow up on some of these questions because they're very, very important. Well, guess what happened? The president, Donald Trump, told Pompeo, who was then CIA Director Mike Pompeo, to invite Bill Binney, our star forensic expert and former technical director of NSA, in. And he did. On October 24th, 2017, Bill Binney goes into Pompeo's office on the 7th floor of the CIA headquarters where I spent a lot part of my life, okay? So he goes in there, and Pompeo says to him, Mr. Binney, you're probably wondering why you're here. I have to tell you right off the bat that you're here only because the president instructed me that if I wanted to find out what really happened about the DNC emails, I needed to talk to you. Well, Bill said, oh, that's good to know, Mr. Pompeo. What do you want to hear? And Pompeo says, well, what's your story? And Bill is kind of a plain-spoken person from Western Pennsylvania. He doesn't trim his comments. He said, well, Mr. Director, your people are lying to you, and I can prove it. Well, conversation, Pompeo don't want to believe that. So Pompeo says to him, well, have you told the FBI about this? Do you know anybody in the FBI? Here's the head of the CIA asking Bill Binney, okay? And Bill says, well, yeah, I do. Actually, last time the FBI people, they came to my house about 7 years ago at 6:30 in the morning, guns drawn, pointed guns in the face of my wife and my son, and at me just getting out of the shower. Yeah, I that's the last contact I have
Wow.
with the FBI. I don't think they'd want to talk to me. Why don't you do it?
Wow.
He says, "Do you have any contacts with the NSA?" And Bill says, "Well, yeah, everybody knows me, the NSA, but I don't think they want to talk to me." So here you go. They cite these 3 memos that we did, 2 of which were acted upon by the President of the United States, and they thought that might help their case. So long story short, I had to answer the subpoena. I thought long and hard about it. And I said, they're leading with their chin here. I'm going to prepare a response that encapsulates our argument and shows that, if they read those 3 memos carefully, they'll see what really happened. In other words, that the case for Russian hacking is ephemeral. It's never been proven. Indeed, if you're counting on CrowdStrike, a cyber organization, they never even gave the FBI director a final report, and that was okay with him for some reason. Well, you smell a rat here? I smell lots of rats.
Well, I'm curious though, Ray. I mean, in your opinion, why was this done? Why were these emails taken from Hillary's? Or there was some effort to undermine her candidacy, right? I mean, that was clearly going on. Was it not? And I guess Seth Rich is the one who is considered to be the one who did this. And so, did they do this because they wanted to make some money from WikiLeaks, or I know that he had been interested in Bernie Sanders earlier, but so what? Can you explain any of that? What's going on here, and why they're bringing this up again? I mean, this gets so confusing. They're bringing up this case again and exploring Seth Rich again. Go ahead, please.
Well, the Freedom of Information Act sometimes works, and this is completely fortuitous. As I said before, there was an FOIA request for information at the FBI on Seth Rich. The answer came back, no, we don't have anything. And then, all of a sudden, a parallel FOIA request was made for correspondence between these 2 very high-level officials, a lawyer who worked for McCabe, the deputy director, and his fellow Peter Strzok. Now, that correspondence indicated that there were many emails and other correspondences that not only had Seth Rich inside the text of the message, but would headed Seth Rich. So it's completely circumstantial and completely, it's the result of FOIAs, one of which was denied, and the other one they have to deal with now. So that's why it came up now, and it's good that it came up now because it's coincident with all this business with Aaron Rich running around the whole country suing everybody and his brother. With what money? I don't think the Riches are very rich, pardon the pun, okay? He's using Democratic National Committee money, I'm thinking, and he's using the same lawyers that work traditionally for the Democrats. So that's why it came up. Now, what's going to happen? Well, there's a fellow out in Connecticut named John Durham, who's a U.S. attorney, that William Barr, Attorney General, gave the portfolio to look into this whole business about how Russiagate got started. And it's key to the start of Russiagate when James Comey claimed that the Russians hacked into the DNC in order to hurt Hillary Clinton. Okay? Now that was a dual purpose sort of thing. Number one, they could blame it on the Russians, and later, when she lost, blame that on the Russians. I don't think anything more heinous can be charged than somebody giving the presidency to Donald Trump. I hate to be accused of that.
Right.
So what they all that was, what really happened here. So the media, the FBI, what I call the national security state, and unfortunately, the Democratic Party are all wedded to this myth that the Russians hacked into the DNC, and we can prove that they didn't, and that is why we're kept out of the mainstream media. That is why only 2 presidents paid us any heed, but that counts for something. 2 presidents, Barack Obama and Donald Trump.
Ray, we need to take just a quick break, and we'll be back in just a second. Stay tuned. Again, my name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace, and I'm talking tonight with Ray McGovern. We're talking about this case of so much here. Seth Rich, who was murdered. Actually, he was working for the DNC in 2016. He was murdered in Washington, D.C. Now, our time has gone so quickly, Ray. There's just so much to say here, and we didn't get a chance to talk about Julian Assange and get an update on him. We'll do that at some point soon. But I just can't help. I mean, okay, there was not an investigation done into this murder of Seth Rich, and nothing was taken from him when he was killed. It seems as if someone is trying to hide something, that he was murdered because he might have revealed something that some entity did not want revealed. That's my assumption. So I don't know if that's your thinking as well. But if it is, what's being hidden here? But anyway, go ahead. Our time is going so quickly, but go ahead, Ray. Can you respond to that at all?
You ask all the right questions.
Okay.
You ask all the right questions.
All right, good. I'm glad. So what's being hidden?
I'll take a half a step back here and say that I made my career as a political analyst. And when I was in a managerial position, and I could call in the technical people, and we could make judgments, key intelligence judgments affecting policy based on technical information that was incontrovertible, that was supported by physics and things like that. I rejoiced in that. My God, it's a holy Moses. This is going to be a piece of cake, and it always was, because you pick the best specialist. And you can tell the story very quickly. Now, that's what we have. That's what we have by sheer luck and good fortune in our veteran intelligence professionals for sanity. And what I want to do is not confuse their considered decisions and judgments, which bear close scrutiny and have not been argued against successfully. I want to distinguish them from the speculation as to, well, if it wasn't the Russians and it wasn't a hack, who did it? Now, all I can say is the prime candidate is Seth Rich. And my notion is that his brother is exhibiting guilty behavior now by suing everybody and their brother and sister and subpoenaing people like us. Are they trying to intimidate us? Are they trying to pin a conspiracy theorist thing on? And now we have the FBI lying about having information about Seth Rich. So, I'll chuck in one other thing. These political analysts include everything, every little dot that can be connected. Donna Brazil, who was the head of the DNC when Seth Rich was working there, she wrote a book. And who did she dedicate it to? Seth Rich.
Oh, wow.
She and Seth Rich were pretty close. And I don't think anybody, this is the state of the media today, anybody had the guts to go say, hey, Donna, I'm curious. Tell us about why you dedicated your book to Seth Rich. Now, again, this is squishy, circumstantial stuff, but we don't have any other candidates. If there's somebody else that did it, please go forward or forever hold your peace.
My goodness. So there are a lot of strange things going on here. What can I say? Oh, dear.
Heather, there's no understating. It can't exaggerate the significance of this.
Yeah.
Let's face it. The whole thing was built on this, we think, bizarre myth that the Russians hacked in. Now, there would have been an easy way to prove that if James Comey had done his job and looked at those computers and said, oh, yeah, well, here's the Russians. But he didn't do that. Instead, all these things showing, quote, Russian fingerprints or breadcrumbs attributed to Russia they were all massaged by other people. And we have a deep suspicion that the CIA unit that does offensive cyber warfare and can hack into computers and disguise who did and leave these little breadcrumbs attributing it to somebody else, that it may be that this fellow Guccifer, too, is a creature of the CIA, because they certainly have the tools to make it appear that the Russians did it. So that's speculative. What's not speculative is that somebody with direct access, physical access to one of those DNC computers was the one that copied these emails, put it on a little, what they call an external storage device, like a thumb drive, put it in their pocket, took a plane over to Europe or wherever WikiLeaks worked on these, and that had to be after May 23 or 25, 2016, because that's when we know from our own forensic investigations, and we're far better than Mueller and the others, I'll tell you. That's when we know they were copied and onto a thumb drive. Now, that was, okay, so May 23rd, May 25th. When did Julian make his announcement that he had them? June 12th. What happened then? Well, I have this idea that Hillary and her folks were beside themselves because they knew that those messages would show how they tricked, how they stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And so what happened? Immediately started this diversion, a magnificent diversion. The Russians hacked. And so when WikiLeaks published this information on the 22nd of July, just 3 days before the convention, instead of saying, my God, Bernie was screwed out of the nomination, the headlines were, why did the Russians hack? Why did the Russians hack? It was a magnificent deception operation, and it's still working.
All right. Well, Ray, the hour's gone so quickly. There's just so much to talk about here. I'm wanting to thank you so much for your vast knowledge about all of this and everything, actually. So I do want to have another discussion, though, about Julian Assange. I know you've known him for a long time, so I want to have another program where we'll talk about Julian Assange and get an update on him as well. So, Ray McGovern, thank you so much. It's so appreciated. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Harry.
Thanks for sharing all this.
You're most welcome.
All right, great. Take care now. Thanks.